Serenity Valley Stories introduces Skinwalker Encounter, the Raccoon and the Friend. It's taken me a long time to gather the courage to write this down, but I need to share what happened. Maybe someone out there will believe me, or at least understand the terror that still haunts me. This all started a few weeks ago, in the most ordinary of places, my suburban neighborhood. I've lived here all my life, in the same house my parents bought when I was a kid. It's the kind of neighborhood where everyone knows everyone else, where the biggest worry is usually whether the HOA will approve a new fence or if your lawn looks good enough. Nothing ever happens here. At least, nothing used to. It was a Friday night, and I had the house to myself. My parents were out of town for the weekend, visiting some relatives, and my younger brother was staying at a friend's place. I'd planned to have a quiet night in, maybe watch a movie or two, and enjoy the peace and quiet. The first sign that something was wrong came just after dusk. I was in the living room, flipping through channels, trying to find something to watch. The windows were open, letting in the cool evening air, and I could hear the usual sounds of the neighborhood, dogs barking, kids playing a few houses down, the distant hum of traffic. It was all normal, routine. Then I noticed a raccoon outside, near the edge of our yard. At first, I didn't think much of it. We see raccoons around here all the time, scavenging through trash cans or darting across the road. But this one was different. It was just, standing there, staring at the house. I watched it for a while, waiting for it to move, but it didn't. It just stood there, its eyes glinting in the fading light, almost like it was watching me. I felt a chill run down my spine, and I couldn't explain why. It was just a raccoon, after all. But something about the way it looked at me made my skin crawl. I tried to shake off the feeling and went back to watching TV, but I couldn't focus. My eyes kept drifting back to the window, back to the raccoon. It hadn't moved. It was still there, still staring. I started to feel uneasy, like there was something wrong, something unnatural about this animal. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I got up, walked to the window, and banged on the glass, trying to scare it off. It didn't budge. It didn't even flinch. It just kept staring at me with those unnerving eyes. I closed the blinds, trying to block it out, but I could still feel its gaze, like it was burning through the fabric. I sat back down, trying to convince myself that I was overreacting, that it was just an animal, nothing more. But deep down, I knew something was off. The evening wore on, and I tried to go about my night as usual. I made some dinner, watched a bit of TV, and eventually headed upstairs to my room. But that uneasy feeling never went away. I kept thinking about the raccoon, about the way it had looked at me. I was getting ready for bed when I heard it, a faint scratching sound, like something was clawing at the walls. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The sound was coming from outside, near my bedroom window. Slowly, I walked over and pulled back the curtain. The raccoon was there, perched on the windowsill, its eyes fixed on me. But there was something wrong with it now, something more than just its unsettling stare. Its body seemed to twitch and shift, like it was struggling to hold its shape. Its fur rippled unnaturally, and for a moment, I thought I saw something underneath it, something dark and twisted. I stumbled back, my mind racing. I couldn't understand what I was seeing, couldn't make sense of it. This wasn't just an animal. It was something else, something that didn't belong here. Then, as I watched in horrified disbelief, the raccoon began to change. Its body twisted and contorted, its bones cracking and reshaping themselves. The fur receded, and the features of the raccoon melted away, replaced by something much more familiar, too familiar. In a matter of seconds, the raccoon was gone, and in its place stood a figure I knew all too well, my best friend, Kyle. But Kyle wasn't supposed to be here. He was out of town, visiting his grandparents for the weekend. I had spoken to him just that morning, wished him a good trip. And yet, there he was, standing outside my window, smiling at me. Except it wasn't really Kyle. It looked like him, same messy brown hair, same easy smile, but the eyes were wrong. They were too dark, too empty, like there was nothing human behind them. "Hey, man," he said, his voice too casual, too normal for the situation. "You gonna let me in?" My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I didn't know what to do, what to think. My best friend was standing outside my window, but I knew, deep down, that it wasn't really him. It couldn't be. "What are you doing here?" I managed to stammer, my voice barely above a whisper. He just smiled wider, a smile that didn't reach those dead, hollow eyes. "I wanted to surprise you. Come on, let me in. It's cold out here." Every instinct in my body was screaming at me not to open that window, not to let this thing inside. I could feel the wrongness radiating off of it, like a sickening wave of nausea. "No," I said, my voice trembling. "You're not Kyle. You're not him." The thing pretending to be Kyle tilted its head, the smile never wavering. "What are you talking about? Of course I'm Kyle. We've been friends for years. You're not going to leave me out here, are you?" It stepped closer to the window, pressing its hand against the glass. I could see the outline of its fingers, thin and almost claw-like, the skin too tight, too pale. My stomach churned at the sight, and I took another step back. "Please, let me in," it said, its voice taking on a pleading tone. But there was something underneath it, something dark and sinister that sent a chill down my spine. I shook my head, backing away from the window. "No. No, I can't." The thing's smile faltered, just for a moment, before it returned, even wider than before. But the eyes, they were changing now, shifting from that empty darkness to something else, something animalistic. "Let me in," it said again, but this time the voice was different, deeper, almost a growl. The hand on the glass began to twist and warp, the fingers elongating, the nails growing into sharp points. Panic surged through me, and I turned and bolted out of my room, slamming the door behind me. I ran down the stairs, my breath coming in ragged gasps, my mind spinning with terror. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of nightmare, some twisted dream. But I knew, deep down, that it was real. The thing upstairs, whatever it was, had taken the shape of my best friend, had used his voice, his face, to try and lure me in. And it wasn't done yet. I grabbed my phone and dialed Kyle's number, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. It rang once, twice, and then I heard his voice on the other end. "Hey, man, what's up?" My heart skipped a beat. It was him, the real him. I could hear the sound of the TV in the background, his grandmother's voice calling him from the other room. "Kyle," I said, my voice trembling. Are you at your grandparents' place?" "Yeah," he said, sounding confused. "Why? What's going on?" "There's something here," I whispered, glancing nervously up the stairs. "Something that looks like you. It's trying to get in." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and I could hear Kyle breathing, could almost feel the tension in the air. "Listen to me," he said, his voice low and serious. "You need to get out of the house. Right now. Don't look back, don't stop for anything. Just go." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me, and hung up the phone. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold it. I knew I had to leave, but every part of me was terrified of what might be waiting outside. I grabbed my keys and bolted for the door, my heart racing. I didn't even bother to grab my shoes, I just needed to get out, to get away from that thing. I could hear it now, moving through the house, its footsteps heavy and deliberate. "Jake," it called out, using Kyle's voice again, but there was a hint of something else underneath, something mocking. "Where are you going?" I didn't answer. I threw open the front door and ran out into the night, the cool air hitting me like a slap in the face. I could hear it behind me, following, the sound of its steps growing closer, faster. I ran down the driveway and into the street, my bare feet slapping against the pavement. The neighborhood was dark, silent, as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for something terrible to happen. I didn't stop running until I reached the edge of the neighborhood, where the houses gave way to a small wooded area. I dove into the trees, the branches scratching at my skin, the underbrush tearing at my clothes. I hid there, crouched behind a thick tree, my breath coming in ragged gasps. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I could hear it now, moving through the trees, searching for me. "Jake," it called again, but the voice was changing, growing deeper, more guttural. "You can't hide from me." I clamped my hand over my mouth, trying to stifle my breathing, trying to stay as still as possible. I could hear it moving closer, could feel its presence, heavy and malevolent. Then, just as I thought it was about to find me, it stopped. The footsteps ceased, the voice went silent. The only sound was the wind rustling through the trees, the distant hum of the highway. I waited there for what felt like hours, too afraid to move, too terrified to even breathe. But the thing didn't come back. The woods were empty, silent, as if it had never been there at all. When I finally gathered the courage to leave, the sun was beginning to rise, casting a pale light over the neighborhood. I walked back to my house, my legs trembling with exhaustion and fear. The front door was still open, the house dark and silent. I stepped inside, half expecting to find it waiting for me, but the house was empty. Whatever it was gone. But the fear never left me. I could still feel its presence, lingering in the corners of my mind, watching, waiting. I knew it wasn't over, that it would come back someday, maybe in a different form, maybe when I least expected it. And when it did, I wasn't sure if I'd survive. So please, whoever you are, believe me when I say this, if you ever hear a voice calling to you in the night, a voice that sounds like someone you know, don't listen. Don't let it in. Because it's not them. It's never them. It's something else, something ancient and evil, and it will stop at nothing to get what it wants. Thank you for listening to Serenity Valley Stories, and please don't forget to like, subscribe, comment down below, share with your friends, and check out the other stories on the channel.